My name is Marcelo Costa. I'm 55 years old, and I spent 18 years working as a systems engineer at VecTech, a company that started out as a small property management firm and grew into one of the biggest players in the industry. The story of VecTech is, in a way, my story too. When I joined the company, still young and eager to prove myself, things were a lot different. It was the early days of tech, when companies were just beginning to realize how much they could rely on it. I saw this as my chance to not only build my career, but also to help create something massive. Little did I know that almost 2 decades later, my name would be tossed aside so easily. Back then, I was responsible for the company's entire tech infrastructure. I started with basic, makeshift systems that barely held things together. But over time, I managed to turn that into a solid, reliable platform that ran properties across the entire country. From modular servers to complex network systems, I saw VecTech grow and become a leader in its field. I wasn't just an engineer, I was the architect of its stability. But, as the years went by, the recognition I expected never came. VecTech, as it expanded, became more distant and impersonal. There was always this promise that I'd be rewarded in the future, but that future never arrived. The original owners, the ones who started the company alongside me, eventually left, and the company was taken over by a new group of executives. At some point, it felt like the company was more focused on modernizing its image than appreciating the foundation that had helped it succeed. And honestly, I knew it was only a matter of time before my time came to an end. The final blow came on a day that seemed like any other. VecTech hired Lucas Almeida, a 42-year-old CTO, with the mission of taking the company in a new direction. He came from a big multinational and was the kind of leader who knew how to cut costs and modernize things. At first, I was invited to a bunch of meetings where I discussed the challenges and opportunities the company had with technology. But deep down, I knew this wouldn't last long. I was the old guard, the one who had built the empire. But now I was seen as a roadblock to the new vision Lucas and his team had. The meeting was set for a regular day, or so I thought. I was at my desk, as usual, deep into the details of the project I was working on. Lucas walked into my office, all confident like he knew he was about to make a big change. He looked at me and, without any preamble, said, "Marcelo, we're cutting costs, and we need to trim areas that no longer align with the company's new goals. Starting tomorrow, you're out." No hesitation, no remorse, just business. For him, I was just a number on the budget sheet, and in that cold, impersonal office, my fate was sealed. I sat there for a moment in silence. I didn't get angry, I didn't freak out, I just understood. I knew exactly what was happening. My time at VecTech was over. I sighed, stood up, grabbed a box, and packed my few belongings. Some old photos from meetings, my favorite mug, and my phone. I didn't need anything else. What I had built there wasn't in those objects. It was in what the company had become. I knew that VecTech, without my experience and insight, would be lost, but Lucas didn't see it that way. When I walked out of that office, my colleagues were all looking at me. They knew what was happening, but no one really said anything. It was like we all knew the drill. The company was moving on, leaving the past behind. I had just been cast aside after almost 2 decades of hard work, like I was nothing more than a forgotten detail in the company's rapid climb to success. I got home, and Renata, my wife, was sitting in the living room. She could tell right away that something was off. I didn't need to say anything. She looked at me, and I could see in her eyes that she knew. She walked over, gave me a hug, and just asked, "Are you okay?" I forced a smile, trying to act like it was no big deal. "I'll figure something out. I'll bounce back," I said, trying to reassure her, even though I wasn't entirely sure how. That night, we sat by the lake watching the sunset. The calls from Lucas and the others kept coming. They were apologizing, begging me to come back. They all knew I was irreplaceable, but the company didn't. They were panicking, but for me, the damage had already been done. It was clear that the company had lost sight of what truly mattered. And as much as they wanted me back, I knew that it wasn't just me walking away from something, it was VecTech losing a piece of its soul. The truth was, VecTech had lost more than just an engineer. It had lost its roots. And while Lucas and his team may have thought they were making a smart move, I knew the real loss wasn't mine, but theirs. I, Marcelo Costa, wasn't just a systems engineer. I was the foundation of something much bigger. When I first started at VecTech, the company was still a small, family-owned business, and I was just a young engineer with big dreams. It all began with a simple IT contract to manage 4 properties in a small town. There was nothing extraordinary about the task, but I saw it as an opportunity to turn something basic into something great. With every step, I poured my heart into it, using all my knowledge to improve the system, and over time, it became the backbone of the entire company's operation. I knew I was building something important, Not just for the company, but for myself as well. I was the one who designed and implemented the system that would eventually manage every aspect of property management, from contracts to maintenance. VecTech was growing, and I was growing with it. However, things started to shift when the company was bought by an investment fund. VecTech, which had been a small local business, was rebranded and completely restructured. The new heads behind the fund, with their focus on speed and quick market solutions, seemed to view the systems I had built as a burden, something outdated and inefficient. To them, the company's future was in rapid solutions and cloud computing, and the complexity of the local systems I had developed no longer made sense. Over the months, I was slowly pushed aside. I was gradually removed from decision-making processes and planning meetings. Words like modernization and optimization were thrown around constantly by the new executives, and each time I heard them, it felt like they were talking about erasing everything I had built. What I had worked so hard to establish, the systems that had taken years of dedication and effort, were being swept aside as if they were nothing more than obsolete relics. Lucas Almeida, the new CTO, was at the forefront of this modernization campaign. He came in with his sharp suit and flashy ideas, pushing for a leaner, faster company. I wasn't surprised when he started questioning the efficiency of the system I had developed. But what did surprise me was how easily they dismissed my experience, my years of hard work, as irrelevant. Instead of collaborating or looking for ways to improve upon what we had, Lucas and the others treated my systems like baggage. They didn't see the value in the intricacies I had built into the platform, the custom solutions that had allowed the company to expand the way it did. As time went on, the younger engineers hired to replace me were given more and more responsibilities. They were fresh out of college, full of ambition, but completely inexperienced. They didn't understand the architecture of the system or the thought processes that went into its development. They were given the impossible task of learning something so complex in a matter of weeks, something that had taken me years to perfect. I could see the flaws developing, but I was no longer part of the team, and my input was no longer welcome. Then, Lucas brought in 3 junior engineers to take over. These young guys were tasked with learning the system I had built. I knew right away that they could never understand it the way I did. They didn't have the experience or the knowledge. It was inevitable that the system would start to fail, and sure enough, it did. The issues began to pile up, and soon enough, I was getting calls from the new team asking for help. But here's the thing. I had been treated like an outsider, like my work was no longer valuable. So, when the calls started coming in, my first instinct was to ignore them. I wasn't going to clean up their mess, fix the problems they were facing, because they couldn't appreciate what I had done in the first place. They didn't value me when I was there, and now they needed me? No way. I had my pride, and I wasn't going to let them use me to patch up the cracks they had created by disregarding my years of experience. Renata, my wife, had been the first to notice what was happening. She could see the writing on the wall before I could even admit it to myself. Over dinner one night, she said to me, "Marcelo, I think you need to prepare yourself. They're pushing you out." At first, I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe that after all these years, all my contributions, they would just toss me aside. But deep down, I knew she was right. I was being phased out, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. It was a bitter pill to swallow, especially when I tried to hold on to the idea that my experience, my work, couldn't just be replaced so easily. But Lucas and the new leadership team had already made up their minds. They didn't need someone like me, someone who had seen the company grow from the ground up. They wanted fresh faces, fresh ideas, and a faster way of doing things. And in their eyes, that meant getting rid of me. I still couldn't shake the feeling that I had been treated unfairly. It was one thing to move in a new direction, but it was another thing entirely to disregard the very foundation that had made the company what it was. They were building on the work I had done, but none of them seemed to care that it was my sweat and effort that had created it in the first place. Things at VecTech were only getting worse. The new systems that Lucas and his junior engineers were so eager to implement had started to fall apart almost immediately. The same systems I had spent years building, systems that were the backbone of the entire operation, were now malfunctioning, and the cracks were starting to show. As the days passed, the calls and urgent messages kept coming in. At first, it was a few isolated problems here and there, but soon enough, entire departments were reporting critical failures. Tenants couldn't access their accounts, payments were being delayed, and everything was falling apart. The kind of problems that used to be unthinkable were now daily occurrences. I started getting messages from my former colleagues, the ones who had worked with me for years. They were frantic. Some of them had been part of my team, and I could tell that they were desperate for a solution. The pressure was mounting, and I could feel their frustration through the phone. Some of them even apologized for how things had turned out. but it was clear they were in way over their heads now. They needed me. The company needed me. Then Lucas called. His voice was different this time, tinged with panic. "Marcelo," he said. "I know this isn't what we planned, but we need your help. We'll pay you for consulting. A generous fee, I promise. We're not looking for a permanent solution from you, just to get us back on track for a little while. Please." I could tell he was running out of options. He was a good guy, but this was his mess, and he knew it. Part of me wanted to say yes, to take the money and fix the mess they had made. I had the skills, the knowledge, and the experience. But another part of me couldn't get past the fact that they had discarded me like a worn-out tool the moment they thought they could move forward without me. I wasn't going to jump back into the fire just because they realized they'd burned everything down. It wasn't my job to clean up their mess, not anymore. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, an unexpected offer came my way. I'd been headhunted by Devlin Systems, a local competitor that had caught wind of my situation. Lawrence Devlin, their CTO, had heard about what was going on at VecTech and saw it as an opportunity. He called me up one afternoon and, after some small talk, got straight to the point. "Marcelo," he said, "we've been following your work at VecTech for years. We're impressed by what you've built. And now, with everything that's happened, I want to offer you a position here with us. We want to build something solid, something lasting, and we need someone like you to help us get there." His words struck a chord. The offer was generous. Not just a higher salary, but stock options as well. It was a position with real potential, a chance to be part of something from the ground up. Lawrence wasn't just looking for someone to fix a broken system. He was looking for a partner to build something better. He knew what I could bring to the table, and he respected my experience. I spent a lot of time thinking it over. On one hand, there was Devlin Systems, a fresh start with new challenges, a place where my skills would be truly appreciated. On the other hand, there was VecTech, my baby, the company I had built from the ground up. Despite everything that had happened, I still had a deep connection to it. It felt like abandoning my own creation, like turning my back on something I had poured my heart and soul into. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I had already been pushed aside, discarded like a used-up tool. The VecTech I knew, the one I had helped shape, was gone. It was a shadow of what it once was, a company that had lost its soul in pursuit of modernization. And then, just when I was starting to come to terms with my decision, Lucas showed up at my door. He looked nothing like the confident CTO I had first met. His suit was crumpled, his hair disheveled. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in the last week. There was no more bravado in his voice, just desperation. "Marcelo," he said, almost pleading, "please, I know I messed up. We need you. You're the only one who can help us. The system is crashing, and we can't keep going like this." It was a hard moment. I could see it in his eyes. He knew he'd made a mistake, and now he was willing to do whatever it took to fix it. But I also knew the truth. The company, under his leadership, had lost its way. The damage had been done. I couldn't go back and fix something that was broken beyond repair. I had given everything I had to VecTech, but it wasn't the same company anymore. The VecTech I had helped build no longer existed. It had been swallowed by a corporate machine that cared more about cutting costs than about valuing the people who had made it great. As I looked at Lucas standing there, I realized something. The company I had helped build was gone, and no matter how much they begged, no matter how many offers they made, I couldn't go back. I wasn't going to fix their mistakes for them. I wasn't going to be their safety net. I shook my head and told Lucas, "I'm sorry, but I can't help you. VecTech is beyond saving. You have to figure this out on your own." He stood there for a moment as if waiting for me to change my mind, but I knew I had made the right decision. I took a deep breath, and with that, the door to my past finally closed. After deciding to join Devlin Systems, I set my sights on rebuilding systems, this time with all the lessons I had learned from my years at VecTech. The experience I had gained wasn't just technical knowledge, it was a blueprint for doing things the right way, with proper documentation and contingency plans. At VecTech, everything had always been reactive, scrambling to fix issues as they came up with no long-term vision or strategy. But with Devlin, I had the chance to do it right from the start. I wasn't alone in this new venture. I brought in engineers who shared my long-term vision, people who understood the value of quality, of taking the time to build something that would last. It wasn't just about getting by, it was about creating something solid, something dependable, something that would stand the test of time. This was exactly what VecTech had failed to see. Things at Devlin Systems started to come together quickly. The team was small but incredibly focused. We built a robust, highly efficient system, and within months, Devlin had positioned itself as the leader in the sector. We had integrated systems that nobody else could touch, systems that worked seamlessly across platforms. It was a huge accomplishment, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. For the first time in a long while, I could see the fruits of my labor come to life, and it felt like I was finally doing things right, on my own terms. Meanwhile, things at VecTech continued to spiral. As I'd predicted, the company's new direction, cutting corners and focusing on quick, cheap solutions, had started to backfire. Long-term clients were growing frustrated with the constant system failures and inefficiencies. The problems that had started as small glitches had snowballed into a full-blown crisis. Major clients began threatening to pull out, and the company was facing a serious financial disaster. VecTech needed help, but I wasn't about to give in to the temptation to return. I had made my choice, and I knew that it was the right one. They had pushed me out, and now it was their turn to deal with the mess they'd created. Months passed, and Devlin Systems not only weathered the storm, but thrived. We had turned a small but ambitious company into the industry leader, and I was proud to be a part of it. Our systems were now being used by some of the biggest players in the business. We had created something better than what I had ever built at VecTech, something that actually worked the way it was supposed to. As we grew, our team expanded, and I found myself in the kind of leadership position I'd always dreamed of. It wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about building a company culture that valued experience, foresight, and solid craftsmanship. Then one day, I got a call that I hadn't expected. VecTech had been bought out by Devlin. The very company I had joined was now in the process of acquiring the company that had let me go. Lucas, now stripped of his position as CTO, was being pushed out, and they needed someone to handle the integration of the two companies. I was asked to come in and lead the process, bringing my experience and expertise to the table to help integrate the two organizations smoothly. The company that had fired me, the one that had thrown me aside as if I were disposable, was now looking to me for help. They needed me to save them. At first, I thought about it for a moment. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. I had been dismissed, and now they were asking me to come back and clean up the mess they had made. Part of me wanted to take the opportunity to prove them wrong, to show them just how far they'd fallen since they pushed me out. But I didn't feel any satisfaction in that. It wasn't about revenge. It was about doing the right thing. I had moved on, built something new, something better. Now I was being asked to help fix the broken pieces of what VecTech had become. But I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it because it was the right thing to do. When I walked into the boardroom for the first time after all this time, it felt like stepping into a completely different world. Lucas, who had once seemed so confident, was now sitting across from me in a much smaller, less powerful position. He looked tired, defeated. There was no smugness in his eyes, no sense of superiority, just a quiet acknowledgement of how wrong he had been. I could have gloated, could have pointed out that I had been right all along, but I didn't. Instead, I simply nodded and got to work. The work spoke for itself. I didn't need to rub it in. The fact that I was now the one in charge of fixing the mess was enough. As we moved forward with the integration, I realized that this was the full circle of my journey. The VecTech that had once been my home, the company I had built, was now a part of something bigger. The systems I had created became the foundation for the future of Devlin Systems. It was ironic, but in a way, I felt proud. The company that had let me go was now relying on the very systems I had designed, the systems that had once been dismissed as obsolete. The future of the company was now resting on the things I had created. By the time the integration was complete, I had stepped into a leadership role at the newly merged company. Devlin Systems had not only absorbed VecTech, but had become even stronger because of it. The systems I had built were now the backbone of a company that valued experience and foresight over quick fixes. I had finally found my place, not just as an engineer, but as a leader who could shape the future of a company. The legacy I had worked so hard to create at VecTech had found a new home, and I was proud of what we had accomplished. As I looked back on everything, I realized that all the pain, the frustration, and the setbacks had led me here. I had been given a second chance to build something meaningful, to prove that experience and craftsmanship still mattered. I didn't need to look for validation from anyone else. I had done it on my own terms, and that was enough. VecTech might have been the company that let me go, but it was Devlin Systems that gave me the opportunity to truly thrive. And as the future unfolded before me, I knew one thing for certain: the best was yet to come.